Okay, I'm recording now. Thanks very much, so much for coming. That you're even more people than I thought there would be. Shout out to Josh at Heavy Worlds who didn't make it, but we're in the community hub here at Wolf Territories Grid. I'm going to be talking about something called object storage, which is one of my little passions, and it all came out of, I watched when OS Grid had like a 10 terabytes or some kind of ridiculously large type of assets, and they had to move it from one place to another, and 10 gig, 100 gig, I don't know, it was big, and they were moving it, and their grid was offline for 3 months, and I sat there and I thought, I do not want to be dropping my grid offline for 3 months because I'm running out of disk space. That's ridiculous. So there must be solutions out there that we use for other applications such as YouTube, etc. So I'm going to just flip through these screens, and I'll use my screen as we go. So, oh, that worked good. So what object storage is not? It's not a file system, okay? So it can sit on top of file systems, but it stores data in a different way, okay? It's and the real the appeal for me was when I heard the word object storage. I sat and I thought about our assets, and our assets are basically objects, like thousands and thousands. In fact, I've got 1.2 million after 2 years on the grid here. Assets sitting there waiting to and it is one of those things that's a bit of a nightmare for grid owners because it tends to grow when you're not looking, and actually it's quite difficult to monitor, because if all you've got is a standard file system, then you're going to be looking at your assets by just how much disk space they're using, and you have no idea just how many files there are or anything like that. So object storage provides a way for you to also have web accessible data. What I mean by that is you can actually, it does crash, okay, and this is something we're going to cover as well, the way that object storage can heal data. All right, so where do we go? Web accessible data, we've done that. Okay, wrapping functionality, I have no idea what that was about. So object storage compresses data and it wraps it in metadata, so when it's stored on the disk, it's stored as an object rather than stored in tracks and sectors. Although you can store it on a standard file system. Sorry, I'm just going to have to go all the way back around now. Who built this? Well, that would be me. So I'm only on the first slide. Right, okay, that's it. So I use Minio object storage. It's been very faithful to me for the last couple of years. It's free. Okay, you won't need to start paying till you've got 10 terabytes of space. Data, as I said before, stored as objects, not tracks and sectors on a disk. If you store it on a disk that is formatted like that, you can store it on a standard file system like ext4. There's things it's not good for. All right, you can't run a database on it, okay, because it's designed for write once and read many times. So, for instance, assets are the perfect example of that. So, if someone creates a house, and that's made up of lots of little assets, and then they save it off and they bring it back as a mesh, and that's another asset. So, but those things will be stored in your object store and read many times, or maybe 3 times, depending on how popular they are. Minio object storage is industry standard S3 storage. So Amazon, it's like Amazon, Contabo, a lot of these companies offer object storage. Don't do that, because it's very expensive to do it through them. And also the other thing is, one of the things that makes object storage slow is how far the object storage server is away from your servers. If you want a fast grid, the key is to keep everything physically close together. Okay, and using NVMe drives, using high-speed networking it's all physically next to each other. You can, in my experience, it doesn't, because I've got one user who asks me sometimes, can you put a server in the States? All my servers, I've got 11 of them, are sitting in Dusseldorf in Germany. There's no point putting one in the States because it would still have to access the assets. Okay, but I could actually set up a mirrored object store, which I've actually got a mirrored object store, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, yep, Dusseldorf, is a very good place to have it. It's quite inexpensive. So what is it good for? What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. But object storage is different. So write once, read many apps. So it's like we talked about assets. What about backups, ORs, web pages, videos, anything like that? File sharing. It's really cool for file sharing. I'll show you something that I've got on my grid. What if I told you that excuse me. What if I told you that anybody can log in? I'll show you it a bit later. We've got like a grid control panel. You can log in right now and download an OR of your grid, your region, from the object store from last night. The last night's backup. It's very resilient. You can set up clusters. Oh, excuse me. I'll show you what I've got. Dan, could you get us a drink, please? So I'm just being fed drink. Okay, so it's quite easy to set up. Now, it is under Linux, so you're not going to be using a GUI to do it. You're going to be typing it into terminal. Yeah, it's not much fun. You're going to be typing it into typing things into terminal, but it's about 5 commands. Okay, it's apart from the formatting of the disks and everything like that. Self-healing. We had this on the grid actually the other day. So I actually had quite a small before. This was before I had the setup I've got now, but I had quite a small setup with my object storage. And people started going, "Oh, I've got a problem with my assets," and I said, log out, give it an hour, come back. They logged out, gave it an hour, and came back, and everything was fine again. And that was because although there was a problem with the asset store, because I store it, object storage, because of the redundancy of it, it'll self-heal files as they get corrupted. It's fast, but you need to configure it right. I will put up to my GitHub. Cheers, mate. Thanks. I will put up on my GitHub a cheat sheet for it with some scripts for you, like so that you need to access it. If you configure it wrong, you will have all kinds of problems when you're putting. And that's not in terms of the server, but in terms of the clients. If the clients are not configured right, you'll find all kinds of really weird things going on. It is cross-platform, but I recommend running it on Linux. Linux isn't as scary as it sounds. And also, if you tell people you use Linux, they think you're a hacker, which is also great. But it is cross-platform. We're all run on Windows, but I don't recommend it. The way I explain it is like this. So Linux was an operating system, so a server operating system, that has had a desktop front end put on it, although I don't use the desktop front end apart from my laptop, and one server where I accidentally installed it. So by building things on a server operating system, we've got a much better platform to build for the future. Whereas Windows was a desktop operating system, which they kind of built all the servery stuff in underneath it, and there's some bits and pieces out of Linux that are actually stuck in there. Okay, and also Linux is free, so it's another free thing. Okay, and that last point, one of the worst nightmares is when you're sitting there watching your storage space going down, and you think to yourself, what am I going to do? But you can actually expand your object storage live. Okay, what you do, you set up a new object storage, and then one mirrors the other one, and then you just switch the old one off. And no one knows, because if you use a DNS name to point to it, like ours is os.authterritories.org. If we use that to point to it, so if I'm moving to I mirror it, then after a few days I just flip the domain name to point off, and I leave the mirror running. It may as well just sit there running, because they'll both be a copy of each other, and then we're ready with our new expanded object storage with zero downtime, which is what users love. Okay, so this is what I've got. I know, this is what you can have. So you can either have a single server with a single drive. You can have a single server with many drives, okay, which is what I've got on one of my servers. And you can have multi-server. Actually, no, I've got that one. Multi-server. I've got a kind of mixture of this. So you can have multi-server, multi-drive. And basically the beauty of it is you can add and remove nodes to it live and keep it all online. The more you have, the less likely things are going to go wrong, because obviously if you've got 5 servers if you had 5 servers with 5 disks, you'd have to lose quite a lot of the object storage. You have to use like 90% of it to lose any data. I mean the other problem with it is backing the whole thing up. I mean, I don't know if even if with a Proxmox backup, which does snapshots, which is really quick, it still freezes the machine. So what if you didn't have to back up anymore? What if you could actually just leave? You could have the data live all the time, but know that live all the time, but know that that data is safe and being backed up. That's what object storage does for you. Okay, next one. Using it with OpenSIM. So for me, it solves the asset store issues. It's a great place to throw all files, server templates, database backups, and if you want to access it, you can access it through a standard file system using rclone or S3FS. If you're using Debian, it tends to work better. And they're basically things, and what they do is they allow you to mount the object store as a drive, much like you do with your standard, as if you just plugged a drive in. So then you can do copies and backwards and forwards to your object store. Okay, so I did do why Linux and not Windows. I've already done that. So there are little catches. I know it sounds like heaven, but it isn't. Don't edit files directly on object storage. So, for instance, and this goes back to the whole database thing. You can't run a database on object storage. It just isn't going to work because of the way that the object storage manages the data. Okay, so you edit the file off online and you deliver it to the object storage. But for assets, it's perfect because that's exactly what we do. Your region servers or inventory, all that sort of thing can be thrown onto the object storage and all those files, and it's all much nicer. So this is my grid control panel, and you can see that there's one there that's got all kinds of functions. I'll just go over here. Now obviously this is ridiculously big. So obviously I've got piles of servers. So if you imagine I've got 11 servers running, virtual machines that is, sitting on 6 hardware servers plus a backup server and 1100 regions. So anyone can log into this control panel and they can click restart region, and then what happens there is that obviously the system that I've built has to know which server their region is running on and tell that server that we need to reboot their region. But one of the cool things about it, you'll see the one that says download OR file. So what you can do with object storage is in a script. Okay, so what happens when they click download OR? What it does is it runs a thing called there's a tool you get free with Minio called MC, and what MC can do is generate a temporary link to a file. So obviously we know where the OR file is. It's on the object storage. Then we run this script to generate a temporary link and give that to user and say, there you go, that's your file. So they click on that link. It's time limited, and then it gives them access to just that file on your object storage. Out of just over 1.2 million files, it gives them access to that. Now I'm going to do upload as well, because you can do the same thing. You can give someone a temporary link where they can upload an OR from. And as grid owners, that's one of the biggest problems that we have, is when someone comes along and goes, oh, can you download your OR please? And you're thinking, oh, now I've got to go and create the OR. I've got to put it somewhere because it's big, and then I've got to give them the link, and then they can't download it because I put it on Google Drive and they can't log in, and it's, this just takes all that away because you can just generate a simple link either from terminal command line or by using a script, which I do in this case. I use a script. So that's one of the real cool things about object storage. So this is what I've got. So I've got a main server that's running on their own excuse me. My main server is running with 2 1 terabyte NVMe drives, but I'm using like 100 gig on each one, and then I've got another server that's running with just a 1 terabyte SSD drive, and that's mirrored across. So basically anything that gets written over here on the left, anything that gets written there gets written to 1 terabyte SSD drive on the other server. Let's go through some scenarios. So one of the disks fails on the big server, it'll just go, the disk failed, and it'll carry on running. No one will even know except me, because I'll get messages and screaming. I haven't got to the. I just did that because I could. I haven't done the screen yet. I'll get there. I will. Honest governor. It's mainly if someone asks me to show them something. But let me get through my presentation. So, in fact, right now I'm going to show you. This is that's actually. It comes with a web interface. So let me just. I'm just going to try this and see if you can see this. So I'm going to log into Wolf Territories Minio. Okay, this is actually part of the service. You can see that there. I'll take you around and I'll show you a few things. So we've got right now 135 million, 1.3 million objects in there. You can see that we're taking 264 gig. I can click on this. You can see all the there's a few region servers there. There's data, there's all kinds of scripts and stuff that I have backed up on here. Now, object stores store things in buckets, and you can give access to a bucket. I hope you can see this. You see this okay? Yeah, okay, so object store things in buckets. There's our main Wolf Territories grid bucket. But I could create other buckets for uploading files and ORs and everything like that. You can see we've used about a quarter of the space, but that's taken 2 years, so I'm not too bothered. We've got facilities for monitoring. This is just for this server, so I can also flip over to the other server and have a look. And I show you, let's see, site replication. So you can see there's the two servers, and it's replicating from one to the other. And this is all web-based, so it's quite easy to manage your object store and see what's going on with it. Good. That's that bit. Good. Right, so back to this. Okay, so yeah, this is only because I hadn't worked out how to stream my screen. So, okay, so has anyone got any questions? Since this is quite well, I just cough everything up. Oh dear. If you can just type the questions in the chat. If there's no questions, it's only a short session. I'm going to build a GitHub, so if you add me as a friend, if you're not already added me as a friend, also join our Wolf Territories Discord as well, and I'll put the link to the GitHub in there once I've done it, and that'll have the scripts in for connecting to the object storage with rclone. Which is quite important, and also with using S3FS to connect to it as well. Can't think off the top of my head of much else. There isn't that much to it. It's basically, once you understand the principles behind it and why it's better than standard storage for certain applications, you see how great it is. And of course, don't forget, object storage compresses everything, and you can choose what you have compressed and what you don't have compressed. So that means that your 500 gig of data that you'd normally have on standard storage suddenly becomes much smaller. And I've actually noticed, like when you first upload files and things like that, they're quite big, and then it seems to make them smaller, and your disk usage seems to go down, which is really great, because what's costing you money is hardware. Resources cost money, so the less resources you can use, the better. Whew. I can set up okay, so this is more a backup system. You don't run don't run OpenSim. You can't run open. It's technically possible to run OpenSim from the storage, but you wouldn't be able to put any temporary files or asset caches or anything like that on it. So if you diverted your asset caches and temporary files somewhere else, that would be fine. So remember what we talked about: write once, read many. So that's the principle behind it. It would be a bit of a nightmare, to be fair, but it's really good for storing, your OR files. Your assets are fine because you do a lot of this write once, read many stuff. But anything writing temporary files, bad idea. No temporary files, no asset caches, no databases, because databases offer a big file that it reads and writes from part of, it will crash and go horribly wrong, and they will be crying and running and biting. And I know that's Jurassic Park. No, there'll be, it. Yeah. So there's things object storage is really great for, and things it's really bad for. But the real thing it's really good for is the biggest pain that we, as grid owners, when you own a grid this big, if someone can't find their cat in their inventory, it turns into a huge major thing. So if you can be assured that most of the time that data is as safe as you can possibly play it. Okay, storage space, you think 6 cores, and yep, that's fine. I tell you what, Minio does seem to fit itself to 6 cores of 32 gig RAM. Minio, yeah, that's fine. It's not going to be mega quick like that with that amount of cores. That's not a lot of cores, but the thing is, it's really what you're trying to do. So, no, exactly. If it's just to try it, then you can try it with anything. Do you know what I mean? You can try it with your home computer if you want. My servers, I've just the more resources you give to it, the faster and better it is. When I do my GitHub a bit later, I'm going to include. There's a command you can run that frees up memory on Linux machines, especially if they're running as VMs, and it's quite hilarious. It just basically tells the VM to drop its caches, so that helps when you've only got like 32 gig of RAM. But 32 gig of RAM, that's okay. I would recommend NVMe drives if you can. What about RAID? There's not much point doing RAID because you've got the object storage will do the RAID for you in a sense. Yeah. So if you've got, what I mean by that is, let's say you've got 4. Excuse me. Somebody messaging me in the middle of a seminar. Let's say you've got 2 or 3. Let's say with a simple system. Okay, we've got a couple of NVMe drives. This is a standard setup you'll get from Hertzner or my girl who runs my servers, who's brilliant, from dreamhosting.at. She is amazing. I've got to plug her because if you're used to the sort of technical support where you raise a ticket and wait 3 days for something to happen, she deals with it on chat very, very quickly. Anyway, dreamhosting.at, there you go, Dyer, I gave you a plug. So back to the thing. So the sort of servers you can get rent very easily will have a couple of NVMe drives on them, and maybe 32 gig of RAM, 10 cores, something like that. That's fine. And so you don't put RAID on it, so you've then got the 2 drives, and then you use both of those drives as each one is a drive within the object storage. If you put RAID 1 on it, you're just going to get 1 terabyte of NVMe space. So effectively you've only got, so then you're relying on the RAID to do what the object storage is going to do anyway. Okay. Good. So I try and put NVMe drives on all my servers, regardless, region servers, everything, because they're just the fastest. With OpenSim, everything is about speed and RAM, because it's quite greedy with RAM. It does eat RAM, and it does seem to have more memory leaks than me. I have memory leaks. I can't remember things. So if you can, you need to manage your RAM and stuff like that. And on Linux, there's stuff you can do which really will be effective. I'm running 400 regions on a 32 gig server right now, in a weird configuration. It was a bit of an experiment, but I do experiment a lot with tech, so you don't have to. I'm actually a programmer by trade. I've been I'm 21, no, 56 or something like that now. I've been programming since I was 16, so I get really excited about new tech and different tech. And what was really funny is when I started doing this, there were 2 or 3 other grid owners who were going, "You can't do it, it won't work. It doesn't work. We tried it, it doesn't work." It does work, but you just have to have the right settings, which I can give you on my GitHub. Okay, so any more questions? Okay. Oh yeah. So back to the user who lost their cat. How do they restore, find it? Well, it depends how they've lost it, but if you, let's say for instance that if you imagine that the object storage has got that file for that cat sitting, it's probably a little GZ file somewhere in the object storage, okay, and it got a bit corrupted. Well, the object storage will pick that up and repair it. It'll heal it. And in fact, if we look on Going back to my screen. If we look on the where is it? Monitoring under metrics, you can see it says down here. I can type erasure. Here we go. Time since last heal activity. You can actually look in there, and you can see it. So basically, it'll just reappear. Is basically what I would say. To be honest, it's very unusual they'll even notice. Most of the time, it might be that something didn't res, then they turn around and it reses because the grid goes, oh, there it is, because the object storage has fixed it. And that's one of the cool things is this whole, storing all these thousands of objects on a file system, on a standard. Please don't store them on NTFS, on a Windows standard file system. NTFS corrupts if you turn off a machine without properly shutting it down on a Windows machine. It will corrupt NTFS and not try and fix it. So what happens is the master fat table gets corrupted, and then what you find is Windows machines get slower and slower and slower because their master fat tables are corrupted. Right, so put it on ext4 file system, put it on block storage, which means there's no file system, let the object storage run it. You don't have that trouble. You'll notice that if you boot a Linux machine, the first thing it does is checks its drive. You'll see it going, I'm fixing that, there's a problem there with it. Because machines do get turned off, machines do naughty things and they get shut down without warning. So, building from the ground up. And of course, if you want to try this and you've got a Proxmox set up, you can have one server with Proxmox on it and build a VM for your object storage, and then build another VM maybe for robust, and then build another VM for 2 or 3, maybe a few regions. You can do that as long as your server's big enough. I will do a seminar on. I'm going to do a seminar on Proxmox. I'm going to do a seminar on running multiple robust. So I run 10 robust servers on this grid, which are basically talking to the object storage. And that's another thing I was told couldn't be done. And I don't split the services either. So that some people use robust, and they split the services down. I don't do that. I've just got 10 robust servers. I've got load balancer at the front of it, and it works pretty well. And you could, when you get to about 100 regions, you need to start having more robust servers. That's the truth of it, especially if you go and load an OR file. I don't load IAR files on here. It just is really bad for the grid. Even with 10 robust servers, it's hard work for the grid. And also, that I've found all kinds of issues with half of it doesn't get downloaded because they're so big as well. Half of them don't get downloaded right, and I just go to the users. Just bring your avatar over and bring the stuff. Please. Okay. Any more things? I haven't talked about how object storage keeps. So object storage also keeps a kind of a historical version of the file, and that's how it does its part of how it does its healing. But that's a whole nother story. Obviously, you can go look this up yourself on Google. It's really good. Minio, Minio, is the name of the product. So yeah. So, is there any more questions or comments? I'm surprised I made it through it. Oh dear, more drink. I mean, in terms of backups now, okay, so something I want to throw in, alright, this grid is designed to blow up. Cool. Yep, okay, if you've got to, please get me on Discord. You can join, if you join the Wolf Territories Discord group, that's the easiest way. If you hit search in here, there's a link to it with all the stats. With backups, so let me think. The way I've got this set up is pretty much any of these servers could blow up and would be alright. And because everything, basically, I rely on the object storage for just about everything. Because it's just much nicer. I really don't want to be shutting people's regions down for 3 hours while we back them up. I mean, this thing I've built here, basically what it has is it's a database. It's a bundle of scripts. that are complicated, and it kind of manages it manages itself. So for instance, if we see that we've got a region server that's getting a bit overloaded with a certain region, you know who you are. People who prim piggies, they've gone around every store in OpenSim and collected everything, and they want to res everything. You know, I mean, all my regions are 1.2 million prims. Most people never get above 30,000, but I know a couple. Where was I going with this? So it's just, you know, I can actually pick a region up and move it from one server to another just by changing a database entry, shutting down the region on one and starting it on the other. But that's to do with architecture. You've got to design. I mean, the way I work is if someone asks me for something for 2 or 3 times, then I'll make a thing so they can do it themselves, because it saves me doing it. Cool. I'm just chattering away to myself about tech. Oh dear. Right, is there anything else that I can help people with? You can ask about anything if you like, while I'm here. Open questions, not just about object storage. Cool. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'm going to end the recording. Any more questions? No more questions? Oh, I'll throw it through his grid. Oh, it's just... Cool. Just want to throw in about, I don't know what brand of OpenSim you're running. OpenSim NGC, got to say it's pretty good. I've been having all kinds of trouble with it, but that's just because I had an older server and it didn't run. But OpenSim NGC is very good. I know I was talking to the guy that runs Consortium, which has got some really nice features, and they're basically shutting that down and bringing it into OpenSim NGC. There's a viewer called the Crystal Frost Viewer. I call it the Crystal Meth Viewer, but I shouldn't really. Crystal Frost Viewer, and that's going to be really exciting because it's running. It's going to be VR. It's going to be all the things that we've kind of been left in the past with this Firestorm thing. And this new Crystal Frost Viewer will allow us to have the most amazing water. Like, you get in a boat and you sail across the water, and the wash from the boat looks real, rather than having to use particle systems. So anyway, that's another thing to go look up on the net. There's a Patreon, and that's definitely worth going looking for. Good. Right, well, I'm going to stop talking then. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming. We're actually 3 people more than I thought there'd be. I'm going to go and stop there. It's been half an hour.